talk about a very special program that we're using here in Albuquerque. And nearly 78% of the violent deaths this year have involved firearms. And our city needs all leaders in different positions, whether it's at the county level, or the DA level, city council, and of course even at our federal delegation and with the Department of Alcohol and Tobacco Firearms, everyone to come together, especially when it comes to this particular program to deal with gun violence. And we appreciate the backup because this is a great program that we're going to share with you today. And we're doing something a little different here in that we've invited some folks over to our APD crime lab. We've also, of course, invited everyone in this room to actually educate folks on this because it's such a powerful tool in dealing with gun violence in our community and also, I think most importantly, homicide. We know that fortunately lots of categories of crimes are showing the first downtick that they have in years right now in our city, but we also know homicides unfortunately are up. But obviously, most homicides are caused or done with firearms, and so that's why this is such an important connection to our work to reduce homicides. So under our new chief, Mike Geyer, APD has made an aggressive push to use modern technology to fight crime in Albuquerque and deploy these tools to try and reduce homicide. Now, since coming into office, APD has been particularly successful in expanding its use of the NIBIN program. That's what we're here to talk about today. That's the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. And this is run by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. And I'll let the experts explain how this program works. But it's basically about a meaningful technology. It's somewhat CSI-like, so that's why we also thought there's a good reason to give folks an actual tour. But this allows investigators to take guns or shell casings and link them to other crimes. For example, in the last year, 63 NIBIN leads have led to 156 different shooting events in Albuquerque. These links help detectives solve more crimes and track down offenders who are responsible for those violent crimes. Now, we're making progress in several areas, as I mentioned, to cut down on crime. We have a long, long ways to go. But it's tough to prevent homicides, of course, but we can target the underlying trends. And like gun violence, that can lead to more homicides. And so that's what this is all about. Now, I've outlined several city initiatives in the past few weeks that we're doing to reduce gun violence and try and keep our violent offenders off the streets. But we are also equipping law enforcement with different tools and ways to address illegal guns, and that's what we're going to talk about in illegal gun sales. And improving ballistics tracing is actually the way to do that, because we can try and understand where this gun came from. Was it stolen? Was it illegally purchased, etc.? So to this end, we are seeking additional resources. This is why we need your help and why we're so glad our congressional staff is here. We are seeking additional resources from the U.S. Department of Justice for about $800,000 to establish a city gun intelligence center. Among other things, this would allow us to hire more investigative analysts and improve gunshot detection capabilities, and we really could use our delegation's help with that. And as well, everyone here who's doing this already, we're going to demonstrate how with just a little bit more extra resources, we can even make more of a difference. Now, so up next, I think we're going to go through a little presentation about what this is, and then we're actually going to show it to you. Okay? Thanks.
Thanks, sir. All right, so once again, welcome to the Crime Lab. I'm Christopher George. I'm the commander here at the Metropolitan Forensic Science Center, otherwise known as the Crime Lab. So to give you an organizational view, a snapshot, where the Investigative Bureau falls, that's where the Scientific Evidence Division is, and that's that yellow column. SED here at the lab, we're basically broken into 4 different units. So we have the Criminalistics unit. They're responsible for the major crime scene team. They respond to all major crimes within the city of Albuquerque. We have the Evidence unit, which is downstairs, which you all will see shortly. They house all evidence for the Albuquerque Police Department and the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department. Then we have our Information Systems and ID unit. They deal with finding out who John and or Jane Does are. The largest portion of the lab is obviously the Crime Lab. It's broken up into 3 different sections. We have the Physical Identification unit, which does controlled substance, blood, breath, alcohol, and the Firearms and Tool Marks unit, and that's the unit we're going to be concentrating on today. We have the Human Identification unit. They basically do latent prints, biology, and DNA. And then we have the CODIS system, which is basically a database for all DNA around the country. Evidence. Our evidence unit, as of yesterday, we had approximately 492,600 pieces of evidence in the warehouse. Within that number, we had, this year alone, we had 1,012 firearms tagged as of yesterday. That number has probably gone up overnight. Within our firearms vault, we have 6,083 firearms that are related to evidence. Firearms pending destruction, currently we have 366. That number is important because about every 90 days we have to destroy upwards about 400 guns. So this map right here is a depiction of the 2017's firearm-involved incidents that the Albuquerque Police Department responded to. Bernalillo County's numbers are not included in here, but if they were, some of the white portions on the map would be filled in. Firearms and tool marks. I have two guests here that work within the Firearm and Tool Marks unit. We have Jill Kurtzenberger right here in the green shirt, and then we have Celica Berg. She is our NIBIN in-house expert. So what do they do within the Firearms and Tool Marks unit? Well, they do firearm and tool mark examinations for any gun that was involved in the crime. They do gunshot residue and distance determination. They're able to determine the distance of a firearm that was utilized in the crime using scientific methods. They do ejection pattern testing. Basically, when a casing is ejected from the gun, they can tell exactly where that gun was in the room or in that space and time. Serial number restoration. If a serial number is ground off a gun, they have scientific methods and techniques where they can bring that serial number back and figure out what the actual number is. We can trace it back to the point of purchase. Fracture matching. There's a knife involved in the crime, and that knife breaks during the commission of a crime. They can actually put the knife back together and testify in court that these pieces did in fact come from that knife. And one of their other duties is confirming the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, or NIBIN, investigative leads. So how does NIBIN work? So every firearm out there basically leaves a unique fingerprint on a fired shell cartridge. So when the firing pin hits the bullet, causes the bullet to go back, hits the breech face of the gun, leaving an imprint. That imprint is unique to every gun, similar to a fingerprint on an individual. When our crime scene specialists go out and they collect shell casings from the scene, they're able to bring those casings back to the lab, and we run it through the NIBIN machine. If there's not a casing left at the scene, but there's a firearm, we can bring that firearm back to the lab, do a test fire, which you all will see shortly, and get that and then run that through the NIBIN machine. So this right here is the our local NIBIN machine. It's an IBIS Trax HD 3D brass Trax microscope. Basically has high-powered cameras in there, which takes a photo of the fired shell casing and uploads that into an ATF cloud. Within that ATF cloud, there's millions of other casings that are uploaded. If there's a match between each of them, they generate what's called a investigative lead. Once we have those investigative leads, that goes over to Commander Mazel Garcia's division, and he will follow up on that shortly on what they do. So NIBIN, some of the key elements for success in the NIBIN program is a comprehensive collection of all fired cartridge casings. So we have put out various memos. Chief Geyer has made it imperative that if an officer is dispatched to a shots fired call, attempt to locate the casing. By them locating the casing, we're able to enter it in NIBIN and actually reduce gun crime. Timely turnaround is also imperative. We are working on entering all casings that come into the lab within a 48-hour time span. The investigative follow-up, which I spoke of earlier, is extremely important, and we're always trying to improve this process by doing a feedback loop. We're talking with other investigative agencies within the Albuquerque Police Department. We're talking with our federal partners and constantly trying to improve the process. The NIBIN database, this is an image on the left side of what basically the NIBIN database looks like. The millions of images within their database, using high-powered software, they're able to match various shell casings from around the country. In theory, if a criminal started in New York City and committed crimes all across the country, leaving shell casings behind, we could, in theory, trace that gun from New York to Albuquerque, New Mexico. The image on the right, that is what an investigative lead looks like coming out of NIBIN. If you'll see the various colored boxes on the fired shell casing, those are unique identifiers fired from that specific gun. Once the NIBIN lead comes out, our firearms and tool marks unit, they have to actually do a correlation review and get the confirmation. If you look at the images on the screen, there's a faint line down the middle of the image. So these are two different casings collected from two different crime scenes, and they basically use a stereo microscope to match them up. That gives them the confirmation, and they're able to give that to the investigative bodies and make that correlation. Same thing on the image on the right. Two different crime scenes, casings fired from the same gun.
Good morning, my name is Misael Garcia. I'm the commander for the Special Investigations Division for the Albuquerque Police Department. Just real quick, a few of the units that are assigned to my division are our NIBIN/gang unit. I have the narcotics unit. I have the investigative support unit. I have all the task force officers assigned to federal agencies, air support. In general, I have all the plainclothes units, and that's one of the reasons I come dressed like this, because we work at an offsite. What my portion of this presentation is going to actually go through what we actually do with these leads when we get them. One of the first things that I want to talk about that I think is very important that we need to understand is the mission. In general, that's the mission that we have up there, but the biggest thing we take away from this is it's a series of relationships between the department, between the community, between other local agencies, between federal agencies, and of course between our district attorney and United States Attorney's Office. In order for us to be successful, we have to have that relationship. Our unit, my unit's goal was the result of Chief Geyer's one of his primary initiatives to me was to ensure that we implement the NIBIN system. And it's become really successful. We're following the Cincinnati model, which was implemented in 2015. In 2015, after it was implemented, after a year, their gun crimes were reduced by 15%. In 2 years, their shootings were reduced by 40%, which shows you the success rate if this program is implemented correctly and unified, once again, as a team. So with that being said, let's kind of get some numbers under our belt before we get into what we're actually looking at. These are a couple of charts that you'll see up here that primarily deal with auto theft and auto burglary. And this is one of the primary means that guns get on the street. And you'll see the first chart indicates, of course, the time period here is July 2016 to March 2018. And we'll see that for auto theft cases, we had a total of 153 guns that were stolen in a car that was also taken. The next chart deals with auto burglary, and we show that in auto burglaries, 882 weapons were taken. Now, what does that tell us? Well, once again, since we are dealing with relationships, in that we have to get it out to our community to know how important it is not to leave guns unsecured in vehicles. So that's something that we all work with as a team. It's just not part of my division, but we work with as a department and with the community. You can see the spikes. I put one more chart at the bottom. You'll see the spikes where we see that. The interesting thing about that is you'll see that they happen usually around the holidays in December and during State Fair. Now, why does that happen? Because of the influx of people that come into the city of Albuquerque, and this is why we key now. You'll hear we always talk about TAC plans within our department, and it's not just SID that works, and it's the entire department. So you'll kind of see the information that we're going into as we start in with this. This next slide depicts where the hotspots for stolen weapons are. We talked about the auto burglaries, we talked about the auto thefts. The first thing that'll jump out at you is, of course, it's going to primarily be at hotels and motels, because this is where you're going to find the largest number of vehicles, and we already kind of saw that relationship. So you'll see at some of these hotels, you'll see at, 25 at the Big I, 25 at Alameda, and Coors, and 40. And that just kind of shows you, and it gives us an indication of, once again, where we see a lot of these crimes. And you'll see auto burglary, we had 621 weapons, auto theft, 219, and of course residential burglaries, 629. So you kind of see the basis of why it's so important for this initiative to be implemented within the city. Once we start getting this information, and we work closely with the ATF, actually within my building, we have APD, our NIBIN gang unit, we have ATF agents, and we're right now working with BCSO and the New Mexico State Police to also assign officers to our task force. But what we first see, and as you saw Commander George talk about, when these casings are entered, first thing they do is they do the correlations. Were these casings related to another crime, maybe to another lead? So this all happens before we get it. Once we get the information from the ATF, this is what my unit gets. We get this information which indicates that these casings were related to these two case numbers. So right away, we start seeing these correlations, and once again, coming from the gang unit, they're starting to do what they do best, which is conduct investigations. So they start looking at this lead worksheet. They start, reviewing the synopsis. Then they start saying, okay, what do we have? What are all these connections? Kind of give you a quick indication. We recently had one that resulted in the arrest of 3 offenders, and we closed 20 cases. So that's how successful working on these correlations is, and it's all from picking up casings at a crime scene. And of course, you saw Commander George, what he does with them. So this is a very effective means for us to conduct our investigations. So what we do is we open up all the NIBIN leads, and we start linking them to other crimes and determine if there's any linking of the suspects. We brief, and we go ahead and talk about it. Now, the only additional thing we've done here in Albuquerque is that we've kind of modified it in that we've broken them down into 2 phases. Phase 1 is where we do have listed suspects or leads that we can actively follow, or phase 2, which we have minimal solvability and no suspects or leads are identified. So that's the way the supervisor of the unit kind of reviews it, breaks it down, and we start doing our investigations. We also end up with NIBIN hotspots. Now, with the NIBIN hotspots, what this shows is it shows where the majority of these guns are being stolen for us, and this comes off of each lead. What results from this is we interview suspects, we interview witnesses, we conduct surveillance. Once again, we have to remember that the gang unit is a plainclothes or a / undercover unit. So we don't drive police cars, they drive the undercover cars. We patrol these hotspots proactively to see if we know that there's specific weapons being used in this area. For instance, there's 3 or 4 drive-by shootings in a specific neighborhood, and we've collected those casings, because we're not going to know that just by reading reports. We get the report from Commander George, and we'll say, all these casings were taken from this neighborhood. So what does that tell us? We're going to go ahead and key in that neighborhood. We're going to utilize criminal informants, or we call them confidential informants. And if necessary, we're going to conduct a controlled buy if we can, or we're going to go in there and do the best that we can. We do a lot of undercover operations in there, hopefully resulting in making arrests. So here's an example of a NIBIN lead that we worked on just recently. We were patrolling a hotspot where a majority of shootings occurred. We ended up stopping a black Nissan Sentra for it was a traffic violation. As a result of the traffic stop, non-related arrests were made for narcotics, and we recovered a handgun. So you can kind of see the way it's part of our job, it's an investigative process, that we're going to end up catching collateral crimes as a result of these NIBIN leads. We currently are interviewing victim and witnesses in reference to that case, and we think that we're going to be able to positively identify the suspect. So once we do all that, we put together packets, we share them with the rest of the department. We meet with our crime analysis people once a week during the meeting, and all this information that we're talking about here today, we share with the rest of the department. So as of June 2018, right now we have 72 NIBIN leads, and these come daily. We get quite a few a day. Of these 72 NIBIN leads, we've got 169 different shooting events here in Albuquerque. The good thing about this is that BCSO now, Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, has started to work, and their officer, their deputy is working with us. So we've linked up a lot more of the 2017 leads that are now coming into the ones that we have. They're entering their casings. As of June 2018, 11 firearms have been recovered that have been linked to these 72 NIBIN leads. Our program was effectively implemented late March, early April, because it took us a while to find the location, to determine which unit was going to conduct it. So this is all within the last 2.5, 3 months. So as you can see right there, we actively began these investigations in April. To date, the gang NIBIN unit, these are a few of the stats that we have. We've made 18 felony arrests, or I should say the NIBIN gang unit. 23 felony warrants have been cleared. We've recovered 6 firearms. We've had 1 federal search warrant, 1 state search warrant, and 3 of our cases have been submitted for federal prosecution. That's the reason why we have the 3 ATF agents that are assigned to my building, and they work on a daily basis with my gang unit. We've also cleared 3 misdemeanor warrants. This is an interesting graphic that we're going to put up here that kind of shows you how effective we've been here in Albuquerque in recovering weapons. This is a source for states for firearms with a recovery in Albuquerque. So what we're looking at is weapons stolen in other states that have been recovered here in the city of Albuquerque, and you'll see that that total is 1,901. The other interesting thing about this graphic is that within the last few weeks, we have brought in the organized crime unit into SID. Reason being is one of their members is a pawn shop detail, so we work with pawn shops when we deal with working with weapons. We'll also see that when we were talking about the spikes around the hotel areas, we work with ARAPA, we work with all the hospitality. Actually, there's a meeting right after this that I have to go to, and that hospitality meets once a month. And we were going to talk to them about this and see how we can work together during the holiday season when they have a lot more people coming into their hotels. So by bringing in the organized crime unit, we have access to more resources that are going to make the NIBIN initiative a lot more successful. With that being said, I know it's a little quick. I understand you.